Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our first guest is both a lawyer and a psychic medium whose latest book offers proof of spiritual contact from the other side. And he has a technique to help us make contact with spirits as well. We welcome the author of the Afterlife Frequency, Mark Anthony. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Helen. Thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. All right, let's start at the beginning because I understand that you came from generations of psychics.
I do. Both my mother and my father had these abilities, and I've tracked it back into the 1890s on both sides of the family. But I'm the first person to go public with it. My dad was a NASA engineer, and before that, he was a U.S. Navy SEAL. And my mother worked as a commercial illustrator and in fashion. So, we were kind of like the typical all-American family next door, sort of.
Well, when did you realize, or when did your parents realize that you had this ability?
I was about 3.5 years old, Helen, and I started talking to and interacting with my invisible friends, which is not an unusual thing for a toddler.
Right.
Except when mom and dad can see who I'm talking to. I remember my mom going, "Oh, he's got it," and my dad saying, "Oh, he's got it." And so they had kind of mixed reactions because my mother's side of the family, they were from Italy, and they looked at this as a gift from God. And my father's side of the family, they were very conservative Pennsylvanian Baptists, and he was concerned how I would be treated because, it's not always easy, particularly, when I was a kid. This wasn't as openly discussed as it is now.
Right. And then how do you use, you're an attorney, how do you use these two pieces of knowledge that you have?
Well, what I'm doing now is I'm focusing entirely on my spiritual work. So I facilitate communication between people in this world and their loved ones on the other side. But when I was practicing law full-time, I had been a prosecutor, and then I was a criminal defense attorney. Then I was doing complex civil litigation. I've tried over 100 jury trials, everything from marine violations to first-degree murders and wrongful death, very complex civil litigation. And the thing about being a medium is that it doesn't make me all-knowing and all-seeing, but what it does do is it gives me insights into people and into situations. And that did come in very handy in more times than I can think.
You have a technique that you want to suggest people use to help them communicate. So tell me about, it's called RAF. Tell me about it.
Well, one of the healing and educational components of the RAF technique, and the thing about my book, The Afterlife Frequency, it's the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. But it's not a dry technical treatise. I had enough of that in law school, and I'm not going to impose it on anyone. But it teaches people who aren't mediums, how do you receive signs from spirits? I mean, many people, Helen, let me ask you, you've had loved ones who've died.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt their presence around?
Sure.
Okay, had a dream where it didn't seem like a dream, but it was very realistic and it felt like a real conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are all legitimate contact experiences. So I was trying to figure out, how do I explain this to people who aren't mediums? And I was hitting a brick wall, had that dreaded writer's block. I was working on the book, and I thought, well, I'll go for a walk. And I was going to head toward the ocean because that's, I live near the ocean. I figured a walk on the beach will clear my head. But instead I felt this cold chills and tingles, and I was directed elsewhere along this bike path. So I thought, okay, something's going on. So I'm walking on the bike path, and I see these two objects shining in the light, a nickel and a penny. So I reach over, I pick them up, I'm holding them in my hand, and I go, oh, 6 cents. And I go, 6 cents. And I see my father, an image of my father. Both my parents have passed, and he was in the ocean, and he was holding this blue canvas raft that he had when I was a kid. And then it dawned on me, he was telling me to teach people how to recognize signs from spirits. And it was so cool about this is they actually walked me through it. So I knew the cold chills and tingles. I recognized the sign from the spirit, accept it as real, which I did. And then the third part's the hardest. Feel without overthinking. Just feel it. and then trust the message. So I ran back to my computer and the words just flew out of me, and like 10 paragraphs just came. And so I developed the RAFT technique. And so the Afterlife Frequency, in addition to having a healing component and providing the scientific basis for the different forms of spirit communication, such as not just mediumship or after-death communication, which I just described, but also, Helen, for a near-death experience, a shared death experience, deathbed visions, out-of-body, like astral projections, out-of-body experience. So the RAFT technique teaches people to recognize, accept, feel, and trust the different forms of spirit contact, and it can be applied to make sense and to interpret all of them.
You talk in the book about a near-death experience that was experienced by a convict, which I thought was fascinating. So tell our viewers a bit about that.
Yes, I'm smiling because it's one of those things you'll never forget. I was sitting in my law office and I heard my assistant going, "No, you can't go in there." And I heard this gravelly voice. I go, "That sounds familiar." And the door flies open and this guy walks in and says, "Every day for 7 years in prison, I've been thinking about you." And I'm like, oh my Lord, this is every attorney's nightmare.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the psycho client gets out of prison. And then he says, "And why I should have listened to you." And I said, "So you're not going to kill me?" He goes, "No, I'm not going to kill you." And the long story short, he was out on parole and he got into a terrible accident and he needed representation. So of course, I took his case, but he told me about, he said he got into this collision and the next thing he knew, he was out of his body. He said, "I'm going through a tunnel into the light and then something grabbed me." And he said, and I was in this zone between our world and this light, and it was terrifying. And so what he experienced is what's known as a DNDE, a distressing near-death experience, which has euphemistically been labeled a hellish NDE. And so in the Afterlife Frequency, I explain that there's different types of near-death experiences. And as a researcher, what I've seen is that in about 5 to 10% of the cases that are reported globally, people don't go into the light and have the enlightening and the healing and the very loving experience. There are people who get caught between dimensions. They feel that they're in some type of void. But what's fascinating about DNDEs, the hellish NDE experience, is it's a life changer. People who come back, they do a complete turnaround. So it may not be so much that they went to hell as a cosmic wake-up call to get on the stick and turn their life around.
Yeah, turn their life around. It was fascinating. Yeah, he saw himself above his body. It was fascinating. We want to tell our viewers the book is titled The Afterlife Frequency. Mark Anthony, thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. It's been a pleasure being on the show, and I look forward to returning.
Thank you.